Well, when I first saw my father and uncles perform, just seeing the fans' reactions and the energy, that really inspired me to want to be.
The Jackson name could open almost any door, but Jaafar Jackson understood that fame alone couldn't carry him through it. Born into one of music's most legendary families, he chose the harder path, spending countless hours alone in rehearsal rooms, facing the mirror and studying every movement, with the memory of his uncle guiding him every step of the way.
It was day one, and I was doing the bad tour. I was the bad performance.
The Jackson name opened doors, but Jaafar Jackson knew from an early age that his family legacy could only take him so far. Born into music royalty, he understood that earning his own place would require far more than genetics. It would demand years of discipline, sacrifice, and relentless preparation. 2 years into the process, the message became even clearer: work harder. Jaafar was told to double the hours he was already putting in. The goal wasn't simply to resemble his famous uncle. He had to develop the technique, stamina, movement, and emotional depth necessary to carry an entire film. Jaafar Jackson, the second son of Jermaine Jackson and Alejandra Genevieve Oaziza, was born at Cedars-Sinai on a July afternoon. The delivery room staff immediately recognized the Jackson surname, but his arrival was otherwise completely ordinary. There was no indication that this newborn would one day step into one of the most recognizable roles in music history. He grew up surrounded by an extraordinary environment. There were swimming pools, pianos, music constantly playing, and famous relatives appearing with unfinished recordings and rough mixes. Yet despite the family's musical background, Jaafar's first serious ambition wasn't singing. As a child, Jaafar dreamed about becoming a professional golfer, but music kept pulling him back. By the age of 12, his attention had shifted almost entirely toward singing. He began practicing ballads and developing his voice, sometimes enough to make Katherine Jackson stop what she was doing just to listen. Neverland also gave him memories that went far beyond childhood excitement. He watched Michael Jackson rehearse choreography and learned that great performances weren't created through magic. They came from repetition, patience, and relentless attention to detail. Those afternoons quietly planted lessons that would remain with Jaafar long after childhood ended. The golf clubs eventually gathered dust as music became the calling he couldn't ignore. Outsiders might have assumed that being a Jackson meant success would arrive automatically. Inside the family, however, the reality was different. Everyone understood that natural talent was only the beginning. Talent had to be developed. And that brings us to today's special topic. An online clip appears to show Jaafar Jackson performing songs associated with Michael Jackson, while celebrities supposedly react with surprise and praise his performance. Some versions of the story even claim that stars such as Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Lawrence, Johnny Depp, and Brad Pitt were amazed by his voice and viewed him as the next Michael Jackson. But there is an important problem. We cannot independently verify the authenticity of that story or the clip. So is it genuine footage or is the narrative fabricated? Let us know what you think in the comments. At just 12, Jaafar began spending serious time at the piano, figuring out chords by ear and testing his voice against the records he listened to. Every wrong note became part of the learning process. He would repeat musical phrases again and again until they became second nature before moving into vocal exercises that pushed his range and endurance. When cameras for Living with the Jacksons arrived in 2015, Jaafar reportedly remained relatively quiet during much of the production. Instead of seeking attention, he preferred spending time practicing away from the spotlight, where he could make mistakes without an audience watching. His appearance in Tito Jackson's Love One Another video in 2021 gave him another opportunity to observe professional production from the inside. Rather than simply standing in front of the camera, he paid attention to lighting, timing, and how scenes were repeated until everything was right. By his early 20s, Jaafar had accumulated thousands of hours of practice. At the time, it probably felt like ordinary preparation. Later, that repetition would become the foundation for one of the biggest challenges of his career. The production team behind Got Me Singing wanted the song to feel bright and energetic, and Jaafar embraced that direction. The Latin pop track arrived in June 2019, accompanied by a colorful video featuring Brazilian scenery, painted staircases, and ocean views. Brazilian rhythms gave the chorus an upbeat energy, while Jaafar helped shape the hook into something lighter and more contemporary than the traditional Jackson sound. The release wasn't a massive commercial breakthrough, but that wasn't necessarily the point. For Jaafar, the single became a test. Could he create and perform a complete musical package without relying on the Jackson surname to carry it? The answer was encouraging. An album titled Famous was discussed before eventually being shelved, but Jaafar didn't treat the project as a failure. The experience had already taught him valuable lessons about microphone technique, breath control, studio production, and the difference between polished recordings and live performance. Then came the opportunity that could change everything. The audition room in Los Angeles was surprisingly simple. There was a camera, a chair, and little else. Jaafar walked in, pressed record, and delivered his monologue without relying on costumes, music, or elaborate staging. He had one thing to prove: he could become Michael without simply copying him. After nearly 2 years of searching around the world, the casting process had narrowed the competition down to only a handful of candidates. Then Antoine Fuqua watched Jaafar's audition. He rewound the footage and watched it again. Those tiny details seemed less like something Jaafar had memorized and more like something he instinctively understood. And that was the moment the possibility became real. Jaafar Jackson might not simply play Michael Jackson. He might actually be able to channel him. Graham King later wrote "organically personifies" in a production memo. When the news broke, Jaafar's phone buzzed for 6 hours straight. Cast at 26 years old with 0 feature credits, the world expected him to carry a $100 million film. When production kicked off the following year, Jermaine's voice on the phone cut through. "Prove it." That single word reframed everything. Family's faith. Catherine Jackson praised the casting publicly, stating that Jaafar embodies her son. She also called him directly, her voice steady. "You have his eyes, use them." That phone call carried more weight than any studio memo. Jermaine became a daily presence, watching rehearsal footage via video calls and offering micro adjustments. A tilt of the chin, a pause before a line, the way to hold a microphone at waist height. Jaafar set up a second monitor in his apartment just for his father's feedback. The family's support wasn't abstract encouragement. It was tactical. After an early rough cut, Catherine visited the editing bay. She watched 20 minutes in silence, then turned to Jaafar and said she had momentarily forgotten she was watching her grandson. He almost broke down. That single sentence erased months of accumulated doubt. His brothers sent encouraging texts. His cousins shared behind-the-scenes memories. The entire Jackson clan rallied behind him, their collective faith forming an invisible safety net. 2 years of obsession. Jaafar started rehearsing before Fuqua even signed on. 2 years alone in a rented studio with a mirror and a laptop. No audience, no feedback, just repetition. He amassed a library of concert footage, studying not just the moves, but the transitions between them. The split-second decisions that made each performance unique. Michael's personal journals became a key resource. One entry mentioned fear, and that single word became Jaafar's entry point. He cataloged how Michael held a microphone, adjusted his jacket, and breathed between verses while internalizing the emotional core of each scene. That didn't feel like preparation anymore. It felt like inhabiting a space he had already mapped in the dark. The work consumed his days, his nights, his weekends. Music, friends called. He didn't answer. The mirror became his primary conversational partner. He emerged from that period, transformed, carrying something of his uncle's spirit in his posture. The studio had become a sanctuary where doubt couldn't reach him. Jaafar isolated Michael's speaking voice from interviews, looping a single phrase, "I love you, thank you," for an entire afternoon until the words lost meaning, and then found it again. He read newspaper articles aloud in that register, then poetry, then script pages, pushing his voice into unfamiliar territory. Singing required a separate routine, a cappella takes compared against Michael's originals, adjusting VB width and attack speed with surgical precision. He placed affirmations on his rehearsal walls, not as decoration, but as daily mental habits, spoken in Michael's cadence until they felt native. The work wore his vocal cords thin. Some mornings he couldn't speak above a whisper. He rested, then resumed. When he finally recorded studio scenes without backing tracks, the sound engineer asked if Michael's original files had been accidentally mixed in. Jaafar smiled and said nothing. Those months of obsession had paid off in ways he couldn't fully articulate. Rich and Tone Talawega stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, watching Jaafar run the Mottone 25 routine for the 16th time that morning. They had worked with Michael directly. They knew every shortcut and every cheat. Jaafar's feet blistered. He taped them and continued. The Talagas pushed beyond replication. They demanded fluency, the kind that comes only when the body stops thinking. One afternoon, he collapsed mid-spin. His calves seized. He got up, shook his legs, and restarted. By month 3, his muscles remembered what his mind had struggled to learn. He could run a full concert set without stopping, and the choreographers finally nodded. Not praise, just permission to move forward. Jaafar understood that Michael's dancing wasn't technique alone, but expression made physical. The Taloas had seen dozens of dancers attempt these moves. Only a handful had ever achieved the fluidity they demanded. Jaafar had joined that select group through sheer determination. Havenhist carried the weight of history. Polished wood, aging dust, and decades of rehearsals seemed embedded in every corner. For weeks, Jaafar trained inside the same mirrored room where Michael had once perfected his routines. He noticed a subtle dip in the floor, created by years of dancers repeatedly moving across the same boards, and began using that exact spot for his spins. He worked those tiny details into his daily routine until they became instinctive. Crew members who visited Havenhist noticed a change in him. He seemed quieter, more focused, and completely absorbed in the process. Jaafar never described the experience as spiritual. To him, it was practical. The room taught him that every movement had a purpose and that unnecessary motion had to disappear. Havenhist wasn't a museum to Jaafar. It was a workshop. The mirrors had reflected Michael's image countless times. Now they reflected his nephew, creating a strange overlap between two generations. The floorboards had witnessed spins, moonwalks, rehearsals, mistakes, and breakthroughs. Jaafar was now adding his own movements to that history. Jaafar also built a chronological archive covering decades of Michael's career. He studied Jackson 5 television appearances, Motown 25, The Bad Tour, The Dangerous Tour, and History. He watched Motown 25 so many times that he could anticipate the camera changes before they happened. But he didn't only study Michael's greatest performances. He examined the mistakes too, rehearsal footage where Michael missed a beat, lost his balance, or failed to complete a move. Those imperfections mattered because they revealed the human being behind the legend. Jaafar also studied the influences that shaped Michael's movement, tracing how elements of Fred Astaire's style, lightness, and precision eventually became transformed into something uniquely Michael. He wasn't simply copying Michael. He was studying how Michael became Michael. The process became part of Jaafar's daily life. He would sit with a laptop on his knees and a spiral notebook beside him, carefully recording observations, drawing diagrams, and writing down questions. Eventually, the choreography stopped feeling like a collection of individual steps. It began to resemble a language. Every performance told a different story, and Jaafar's job was to learn how to read it. When Antoine Fuqua's casting announcement went public, entertainment outlets quickly picked up the story, and the estate also issued its approval. But the strongest validation came from the people inside the casting process. Performers from around the world had been considered, yet Jaafar possessed something the others couldn't reproduce. There was an instinctive familiarity in the way he moved and carried himself, something that seemed connected to growing up around the same family, music, and rehearsal culture. Fuqua described Jaafar's resemblance in terms of the things that mattered most for the role: his sound, his movement, and his singing. The announcement quickly became international news. Jaafar responded by shutting off his phone for 2 full days. He sat alone, staring at the ceiling and absorbing what had just happened. The Jackson name had always carried enormous weight, but now that weight felt different. Millions of people would eventually watch him. Millions would judge him. And every one of them would be asking the same question: could he truly honor Michael Jackson? For those 2 days, the silence around him became its own kind of preparation. Principal photography ran from January through May 2024, with Fuqua maintaining a demanding production environment. The film balanced enormous concert sequences with quieter studio and family moments, giving Jaafar space to show more than just Michael's stage persona. The cast brought its own intensity to the production. Coleman Domingo approached the role of Joe Jackson with a powerful presence, while Nia Long worked closely with Jaafar between setups. Miles Teller brought a controlled stillness to his role, and the actors portraying the musical figures around Michael helped create the world Jaafar had spent years studying. Production was physically demanding. Jaafar performed the dance sequences himself, and some scenes required repeated takes across multiple days. One sequence reportedly demanded 18 takes. His knees became swollen, but he treated recovery as part of the job, icing them and returning to work. By the end of production, the cast and crew had developed a strong sense of unity. They weren't simply making a film. They were trying to recreate a legacy. Jaafar also faced one of the most difficult challenges of the entire project: Michael's voice. For the concert sequences, Jaafar performed the material himself, with his vocals blended with Michael Jackson's original recordings. As Jaafar later explained, the approach was intentionally layered. I'm singing on top of Michael's vocal. It's a blend. But in scenes depicting Michael recording in the studio, the production allowed Jaafar's own voice to stand much more prominently. The goal wasn't to hide Jaafar behind technology. It was to combine his performance with Michael's original sound in a way that felt natural. Jaafar had spent months studying Michael's breathing patterns, vibrato, pronunciation, and consonant attacks. What audiences might interpret as technological manipulation was, in many cases, the result of painstaking preparation. Some fans immediately noticed subtle differences between the two voices, while others couldn't tell where Michael ended and Jaafar began. And that contrast became one of the most fascinating aspects of the performance. Then came the moment Jaafar had been preparing for. The first teaser appeared online in November 2025 without warning. Within just 72 hours, it reportedly accumulated 116 million views across platforms. Fans froze individual frames, comparing Jaafar's silhouette, movements, costumes, and expressions with archival footage of Michael. Social media filled with side-by-side comparisons and detailed breakdowns. Jaafar saw the numbers during a lunch break at the rehearsal studio. He didn't celebrate. Instead, the success triggered something completely different: anxiety. The teaser had raised expectations to an almost impossible level. That evening, Jaafar returned to the studio and repeatedly practiced a single spin until his calf cramped. The hype wasn't his responsibility. His responsibility was the performance. So he ignored the comments, stopped worrying about the numbers, and went back to work. Because millions of people watching a 2-minute teaser meant nothing if he couldn't deliver when the entire story finally appeared on screen. The teaser had made its promise. Now Jaafar had to keep it. The first reviews landed on a Tuesday morning, and one aggregator flashed 27%. Over the following weeks, that number slowly crept toward 35%. Several columnists used words like shallow and sanitized to describe the screenplay, arguing that it played things too safe. Jaafar scanned the headlines from his hotel room, then closed his laptop without finishing a single review. But he noticed one clear pattern. Even the harshest critics